When most people think about Sweden, they think about things working perfectly, housing, healthcare, all of their efficient systems. But in reality, there are many things here in Sweden that don't work as well and frustrate expats and Swedes alike. And today I'm going to cover my top 5 in this video. The first one is the long waiting time for healthcare services. Now, healthcare in Sweden, in my opinion, is amazing. There are a lot of systems in place that try to make it fast and effective. If you've got an emergency or you are suddenly very, very sick, Sweden is a great place to be. I know my husband had kidney stones. I called the ambulance. They were here within minutes. Obviously, there are waiting times to eat, but that's for anywhere. But I think Sweden is really great when it comes to emergency and very, very sick people. They get seen quite fast. But if you are a person who wants to see a doctor and you have no acute need to see them, the waiting time can be quite long compared to most other countries, which is really, really frustrating for a lot of expats and a lot of Swedes alike, especially for a lot of foreigners. When they come and they hear all of these things, free healthcare, efficient healthcare, and then they come and they want to see a doctor, and that the waiting time can be long, that can be very frustrating for a lot of people. And I know that Sweden works on it, and I do understand sometimes that the statistics for all of these things are taken during the summer when staff is low and you don't have that many people, and then the waiting time gets longer. For the most part, my experience has been pretty good here, but I do understand that it can be very frustrating for a lot of foreigners who expect to be seen immediately and have to wait a long time. The next one is finding houses. Now, this is probably one of the biggest issues a lot of foreigners face coming into Sweden. Finding housing is not easy. Now, place like London, it's very easy to find apartments or housing. They're small and compact in London. Sweden, since the rental market is quite regulated, we do have private rentals as well now. There are certain apartments that are made specifically for renting. And in order to get these apartments, especially a first-hand contract, you have to stay in a queue. And in a place like Stockholm, where obviously everyone wants to be, it is very difficult to get rental apartments. People can be on the queue in their local commune for a very, very long time, and the prices are quite hefty. Definitely a big issue that faces a lot of expats as well as a lot of Swedes. The Swedes have maybe a little bit more of an advantage because some of them have sat on the queue for many, 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 many years. But us foreigners coming into the country, it's going to be a tough thing to actually find a place to live. A colleague who was looking for a rental apartment, and she did find one privately. It came quite fast, which was quite surprising, and she got a first-time contract. And the reason for that, I'm assuming, is because it is a privately owned rental apartment that was pretty new. It was just built. She got a first-time contract, and she's paying 12,000 krona for that apartment. It is a one-bedroom tiny little apartment, and it is 12,000 krona, which is 1,200 euros a month. Now, that is a hefty price to pay for a very, very small apartment, but it is in a new block. So when newcomers come here, the housing prices, rental, and how much it's going to cost can take them by surprise. It is a shock. And if you're watching and you are moving to Sweden, I want you to keep that in mind, that it is really difficult to get rental apartments. You can get them secondhand, which means you end up paying more. And then obviously buying a house can be cheaper. So these things can really shock a lot of foreigners. And I want you to be prepared if you're watching this and moving, like I said, that you will have to wait a little bit to get an apartment. And my recommendation is do as much research as possible before coming here. But if you've got a job, maybe your company can help you find a rental apartment. And this is why it's so difficult for a lot of foreigners when they come into Sweden to find rental apartments and houses, because it can take decades, and I really mean decades, on the queuing system to get rental apartments. It is just very, very frustrating once you first move to Sweden. Next one is the cost of dental care. Now, everybody thinks about Sweden and thinks about free healthcare. And while we do have subsidized and free healthcare, we do not have that system in place for dental. Now, dental is very heavily subsidized. I spoke to a friend of mine who is a dentist. He's been a dentist in Abu Dhabi for several years and a dentist here. And he does say that we get a lot more discounts here, especially when they buy the material to do all the dental work. It's heavily subsidized for Sweden, so they can give it as a subsidized rate to all of us going. But unless you're a kid under the age of 18, everything is free, including braces. But as a adult, you do have to pay. Now, while a general visit to the dentist doesn't cost as much, or you might find that it's okay, all of these special things like fillings and all of those things can cost really a lot here. When you have to pay out of your own pocket, you're going to realize just how expensive it is. It's going to cost you. One expat who move here to understand that that dental is not free. You do have to pay for it. You can get certain insurances, but that has to also come from the dentist that you visit. So my recommendation is when you go to visit the dentist, ask them what kind of insurance you can get. I pay a insurance. It's not a lot. It's a insurance I pay, I think, every 3 months or so. So every time I go to the dentist, it is a lot more subsidized. So I think that is something I would recommend for most foreigners coming in here. Speak to the dentist that you go to visit and then get some information about a sort of insurance plan that you can pay, which probably will make it a lot cheaper to visit the dentist here in Sweden. Next one is BankID. Now, I know I've spoken about BankID being the best thing since sliced bread, but for a lot of newcomers coming into Sweden, this can be a really big problem. Until you know the system and until you get into the system and have your own BankID, it's going to be difficult to do a lot of things because let's face it, in Sweden, we need BankID for everything. Sweden is probably one of the most advanced and most digitalized countries in the world. Because of this, a lot of foreigners are going to find it very difficult when they come into Sweden to do mundane things, like your tax papers, to get into school IDs, to get into your bank account, to pay your bills. All of these things, you need BankID. And without it, it's really difficult to function here in Sweden. So that is something I think that works against Sweden. And I do think it is quite difficult to get it. You need to have certain things in place. So I think I feel really, really strongly that even though BankID is so positive for a lot of people, and once you get it, you wonder how you ever lived without it, and you can't live without it in Sweden. But as a foreigner coming in, I want to make sure that you know the BankID is something really, really important. One of the first things you should go and try and organize with your bank of choice and try to get that done, because that's just going to make your life so much easier here in Sweden. But it is difficult when you first move to Sweden, and if you don't know about these things, I think the system, although it is very easy for a lot of Swedes and everyone who has the BankID, can be very frustrating for those who don't. So keep that in mind. And finally, something that doesn't work well here in Sweden is integration. A lot of foreigners come here and they find it very difficult to make friends, to have sort of friendship circles. I've spoken about this a number of times on my videos. I don't think the Swedes are unfriendly. They've just got their, sort of friend clique here. It's very common to sort of grow up with this clique of friends that you have from school and maintain those kind of friendships. You have a very sort of small inner circle. It's not a lot of social interaction with people you generally don't know. So I think as foreigners, that is something that really takes foreigners by surprise. We all know that, but integration really is a huge problem here in Sweden, in my opinion. I think it is something very new to Sweden. I lived in England, and England has been integrated for hundreds of years, actually, because we were colonies. I mean, Sri Lanka was a colony, so they've got Indians and Sri Lankans and blacks and all of those people living in England for many, many years, and that is not the case in Sweden. 50 years ago, 60 years ago, when my mother-in-law moved to Sweden, she is a lot more dark skinned than I am, and we are both from Sri Lanka. It was not common to have people of that color here. They would joke with my husband's cousin that she was made from chocolate, and this is a true story. One day they were sitting down and having dinner, and he crawled under the table and he actually licked her leg to see if she was made from chocolate. And that was just 60 years ago here in Sweden. So Sweden haven't had that many foreigners for a long time. So it is a big problem here. Integration. How are they going to integrate a lot of people who come from different cultures into the Swedish culture, which is also very, very different from a lot of other cultures? They took in a lot of people in the late 1990s and early 2000s. A lot of refugees came, so they suddenly were bombarded with a lot of foreigners coming into the country. What were you supposed to do? The language is different, and it's difficult to say the least, and an issue actually that is heading the discussion in the upcoming elections on the 13th of September here in Sweden. If you didn't know, yes, Sweden is having their elections. Obviously, we don't publicize it as much as they do in the States and England, but this is turning out to be a very, very interesting elections. I'm going to cover that in one of my videos soon. So I hope these 5 points really helped any expats watching to just be a little bit mindful, for these things can be very difficult in Sweden when you first arrive. I do have another 5 that I will put into another list, from all of the roadworks to the interruptions during the winter time in traffic. So all of that to come in another video. You have to be mindful that Sweden isn't perfect. There are things that need working on, and that you need to be patient. For those of you watching and living here in Sweden, let me know in the comments below which of these frustrate you the most living here in Sweden. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you in the next one.